I'm glad to be here this evening, and I'm going to talk to you about what's happening in our metropolitan areas across the U.S. We are experiencing gridlock. There is a lot of traffic jams, and transportation planners, we say there is absolutely no way you can build your way, build enough roads to get rid of the gridlock. So I'm going to focus my talk this evening on sustainable transportation systems. And I'm going to use a phrase that was coined by Thaler and Sunstein called nudge. And I'm going to look at what would it take to nudge you to embrace another form of transportation besides for using your car. So part of that is understanding what you do and why you do it and the time that you do it. So we're going to begin with perceptions. Perceptions, I want to begin with a study that I did in Providence, Rhode Island, where we worked with teenagers from 9th to 12th grade, talking to them about what they did in their spaces, and had them divide up into gender groups so that the guys wouldn't influence the girls and the girls wouldn't influence the guys. And we found that there were definitely some differences between genders and between the time of day. So daytime, some of the same spaces during the daytime. At nighttime, those places were considered unsafe. And also, girls were a lot more fearful of spaces in their travel than guys were. And another point was that if you looked at the mode that they used to access that activity, whether they used a car or walking or the bus, then they said, we found that if they used cars, those type of activities were tied to unsafe spaces. Here in Austin, Texas, we combine perceptions and the built environment analysis to look at bus stops that Huston-Tillotson University students would use if they were to use public transportation. We found that only 10% of their students actually use public transportation. And they said, we don't use it because it doesn't take us to where we want to go, and if you're waiting at a bus stop there, you don't feel safe. So analyzing the built environment and the stops, we looked at 60 bus stops that they would actually use if they use public transportation to access those activities. And looked at the Huston-Tillotson area. Another area was the downtown area. And then the third area was the East Riverside area. And we found that our environmental analysis of these 60 bus stops were in line with what the students were saying. So analysis of the built environment did sustain and did support the qualitative data that we got from the students in the focus groups. And they talked about the trouble and the problems of using transit downtown because of the different things that are tied around that area. So there are a lot of homeless shelters. That was a problem. And then also because of all the bars, they talked about the experience of being confronted by different individuals. However, one thing we did find in our studies was that, yes, most of the activities could be accessed with using the bus in less than 30 minutes. And nationwide, this will shock you, 50% of all travel made in the United States can be achieved with a 20-minute bike ride. 50% of all the travel. 25% of all travel undertaken across the U.S. could be achieved by walking, 20 minutes. So we don't think about these things. We use our car unnecessarily. And so this calls for a training program that Capital Metro could do. If you have been watching the different construction projects here in Austin, you'll see that they have put down a lot of new bike lanes. And this is happening across the U.S. I call different friends and they talk about all the new bike infrastructure that's taking place. And even close to this studio here, we see that there was a new bike boulevard that was put in. And however, if you talk to people in general, they would say, black people don't bike. We just don't bike. And we give the excuse of, it's about my hair. It messes up my hair. Or it's about, we don't have the money to buy the fancy bikes or those clothes that those bikers use. So we say blacks just don't bike. However, that's not true. In 1901, there was a man named Major Taylor, Marshall Major Taylor, and he was the world champion of cycling. He was African American. So we do bike, all right? And there are Marshall Taylor clubs across the United States that are popping up. And even here in Austin, we started our own. February, Black History Month, we had our first black biking club to be inaugurated with a Marshall Taylor Day. And so you do have your own biking. So let's link to this. I'm doing research on how do I nudge people to travel differently. African Americans have the highest obesity rates in Texas. And we are highest in the United States as also. So active transportation includes walking and biking. So what type of program would be appropriate for convincing people that look like me and many of you to cycle more? What would it take to get you to cycle? And so my students in my Transportation Access and Equity course, we are looking at it. We have designed 3 intervention programs this semester. And we're looking at, if I just give you a map of Austin's routes, would that convince you to change your behavior? Many of you are saying no, you're shaking your heads. If you can ride a bike, and I said, okay, I'm going to have an expert take you on a route, and he or she show you the safe routes to go, to link some of your activities. Those that, remember I said 20 minutes? Would you do it then? All right? And then our last group would be if we had, because black folks like to socialize, right? So if we had a social club where you learned how to bike, we first worked with you about safety issues, what to do, what not to do, and if you couldn't really ride that bike, we wouldn't embarrass you, we'd take you off to the side and really work with you. Would you do it then? And so we have developed this program, and we have a survey that would be given to you before the intervention and then after the intervention. Because the whole point is I need to nudge you. We're starting to see, can we nudge you into changing your perceptions? And then after changing your perceptions, then possibly it will change your behavior. So I'm going to ask you that question. What would it take to nudge you into embracing sustainable transportation? Whether that means you're walking to more of your destinations, the places that you go to, you see a lot more. It's amazing. I myself was not a biker, okay, a cyclist. I was asked by the city of Austin and Mellow Johnny's Bike Shop to do this study. And when they asked me to do it, I said, I don't bike. I had a bad experience. I was involved in an accident when I was in college. And I was riding between Bennett College and North Carolina A&T on the sidewalk, and I learned later you're not supposed to ride on the sidewalk. And person in a car was coming up a hill. He looked one way, he didn't look the other way, and there I was. And he hit me really hard and threw me out into traffic. And if I hadn't have jumped up, I would not be here standing talking to you today. So they said to me, no, 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 you're the perfect person to do it because you are the type of person that we are trying to convince. So this project that I'm doing, a person who's leading it is a person like me that had that type of experience. So I'm asking you, what would it take you? What would it take to nudge you to embrace sustainable transportation systems? Thank you.